In today's video, we're going to be tackling some Japanese backgrounds. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to my channel. I'm Daggett, this is Daggett Designs, and in today's video, like I said, we're going to be drawing some Japanese backgrounds. So in today's video, we're going to put together some simple background designs. We're going to do 2 of them. They're quite small and relatively simple, but they contain all of the techniques and all of the tricks that make backgrounds look good. And after that, you'll be able to go ahead and create backgrounds for your artworks, including all of the elements that I've shown you today. So let's jump straight into it by going to the overhead. Alright, I'd like to welcome you all back to the table. So like I said, in today's video, we're covering backgrounds. I've gone ahead and just taken some regular sketch paper and I've drawn out an oval shape. So go ahead and follow this along so that you can create your background images. We're doing 2 backgrounds today, so I've done a small oval here and another one here. They're not very big, but they're going to contain all of the elements that are important, I think, and you'll be able to transfer these to watercolor paper. And it's a great way to practice small background areas so that you're not covering such a large space and using up large amounts of watercolor paper. You can go ahead and practice on these smaller areas. So like I said, I've just traced out a small oval shape and I've got a mechanical pencil ready and an eraser. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Okay, so in terms of doing backgrounds, when you think Japanese backgrounds, the first things you're likely to think of are waves, crashing waves, that smooth sort of flowing water, and clouds. And so the first one we're going to do is clouds and wind bars. So to start this one off, we're going to take our little oval shape and we're just going to drop in a curved line like that. Above this, you're going to do another curved line and you're going to leave a little gap between the 2. Just like that. Then you're going to bring the end of this curve up and around. At the back, you just want to round it off and link it back to the line that you just did. Now from here, we're going to put in some clouds. So the way we're going to do that is by drawing in these little circle shapes. Okay, they're like little semicircles or 3/4 circles. And you just want to vary their size a little bit. So some of them can be quite large and you can do other ones a lot smaller. You can vary their direction slightly as well. Change what direction the clouds are moving in. But you're basically going to do these sort of clouds. They're actually very similar when you think about it to the kind of clouds that you draw as a kid, which are just these sort of balloony, bubbly sort of shapes. What makes them different and sets them apart is the way that you shade them and color them later on. From here, we've got that line that we first drew, the initial line there. Just link that up to your clouds at the top and the bottom with a curved line. Now I want my wind bars to look slightly transparent, but I don't have a main subject matter. So in this case, I'm going to put some clouds that run behind our wind bars. They're going to start from this side of the page and I'm going to run them down in this direction. Now when they run into the wind bars, you're going to touch the line and then continue that part of the cloud on the other side, leaving a really small gap between the line and the start of the next line. Just to give you a more close-up shot of this one, we're coming in with a cloud. Now I want to cut through this next sort of wind bar. So I'm going to come up and leave a little gap. Leave another gap and come down the other side, just like that. And then you can go ahead and just continue your clouds until they link into the next section. Okay, so from here we're going to put in a big swirly sort of swirl of wind and clouds. Again, this is something you'll see, it's pretty common with these Japanese designs. So we're going to put that in about here, and I'm just going to do a nice big spiral like that. And it can be a little bit tricky to get these nice and even, but you want to take your time playing with these until they are even and rounded the way that you want them to be. So I would, if you have to, just go over the top of it, keep erasing it, keep adding to it until you're happy with the shape and structure of it. The parts that overlap with our wind bars, we're going to get rid of those. From this point, you're going to double up on your spiral. You're going to start in the middle again. You're going to follow it around. Now, once you've done this, you can just go ahead and erase the lines you did outside your oval. It's not necessary, I'm just doing this for clarity's sake. And then you can link those lines up with little curved lines like that. Now, along the outside edge of our spiral, we're going to do some really small cloud shapes. So coming around with these small semicircles or 3/4 circles, just bringing them all the way down to our wind bar, and then coming up from the other side like this with our little clouds. So now we've got this swirl of wind that sort of carried some clouds around with it. Coming down from the other side, I'm going to put in some more of these clouds. As you can see, this is a pretty free-flowing sort of method of doing the backgrounds. I really enjoy doing it. And, you know, without a subject matter and without having the layout in mind, it can be hard to make them look correct or organic to the circumstances. But in this case, it's just a good way to practice your lines and your shapes. And it'll be a good way to practice blending and shading these. Okay, from here I'm going to turn my page a little bit just to get me a better angle. And I'm going to come in with a curved line starting just above these clouds. Like that. Curves down and in. And I'll come up again with another curved line about equidistant to this one. You can link those areas up. And just drop in another line underneath this to create a gap. So there's a separation between that block and that block there. For this small line above it, I'm going to do another row of clouds coming around. Like I said, these are just little half circles, so it's a pretty straightforward little shape. You can draw another line in just above this to double up on that. And then I'll finish the design with another little row of our clouds. And to link these areas up, you're going to do the same thing, a little curved line there. And I might do a bit of a bumpy pattern at the top here, at the back of the cloud that we did. And another curved line on the other side there. And that's how we draw a simple cloud and wind bar background. Okay, the next one we're going to work on is going to be some rocks and waves, along with some sort of transparent water and that sort of thing. So we're going to create more of a earth-based, water-based background. This is great for doing koi fish, or it's really good for doing flowers and things like that. So we're going to go ahead and take our oval to start with again. And we're going to come down from the right side to the bottom left sort of area there, about here to here. And we're going to come in with a curve, chop it off at the top a little bit. We'll drop another curve in. And we're basically creating these little angles. So by adding little curves, and in between those curves, sort of chopping them off sharply at the top, we're adding in these little angled shapes. I'm going to come just behind this line that we just did to here. I'm going to drop a curve in like that. Chop the end off. Come down a little bit and forward. Chop that end off and just bring it down to the bottom there. And you'll have to play around with that. You'll find your own sort of structure and shape for these. This is just a sort of basic template for it. From here I want to add some sort of smooth flowing water, maybe like waterfall sort of water. So we're going to come from about here and come up and across. You can see that this is quite similar to doing our clouds. And I'm going to double up on that line also, so that there's a space in between. At the bottom we can just link that up to our rocks. Above this we're going to do the same thing we did for our clouds. We're going to bring a line up and around that follows the shape of the first line and links up at the back by rounding it off. Now to make this part of the water look transparent, we're going to want to put something behind it. So last time we put wind bars instead of water, and we put clouds coming down behind it. Again, we don't really have a main subject matter, so we're gonna layer some more sort of rocky structure in there. Coming in from the left side, we're just gonna come up, cut the tip off, bring it down and touch the line. And then skip a little bit, make a little gap. And just bring a little bit more of the rocky structure through there. Skip a bit, make another little gap. And then just keep creating this rock sort of structure through there. And bringing it down. Okay, and again, this is something you'll play with and sort of find your own shapes for. But the basic sort of template for it is to do curved lines and jagged lines. Curved lines and jagged lines. And you repeat that process to create your rock formations. And you play around with them to find what shapes you like and how you want them to look. To link this up, again, you just drop a line down and we'll follow it around like that. Now, of course, we're going to be adding more to this background, but I just want to show you a little detail we do with the rocks. At each sort of peak area of the rocks, I like to just put in a couple of little circle shapes, oval shapes. There's no specific type of shape. They're just like little dots, little splotches. And this is basically to slightly texturize the rock. You see this in a lot of traditional artwork when they do rocks and waves. They have these little sort of divots, or I don't know what you'd call them, little pockets on the tops of the rocks there, so that they're illustrated by doing these little dots and circles, and they look really nice when the rocks are shaded. Okay, next thing we're going to do is bring up some waves. I'm going to have some waves crashing in the opposite direction coming this way, so we're sort of layering it. This is going to be like the background, and this part of the background is sitting a little bit more forward. So we're going to bring up some finger waves. Now, if you don't already know how to do finger waves, I'll leave a link in the description to my tutorial. I have shown you guys how to draw finger waves before, so it should be nothing new. Drop in a little pattern there of finger waves, and we'll come forward a little bit and do some more. Okay, once you've dropped in your finger waves, I'm going to put another little rock formation behind this. So I'm going to come up and add in my little curves with the cut off ends to them. And we're going to drop this one down behind our little wave areas here, our water areas. So we're just going to do the same technique to drop that down behind the water. So I kind of want to have some rushing water happening in the background here. So I'm going to add in another small rock formation coming from this side. And this is going to sort of create like a waterfall look. So there's like a bit of a waterfall happening in the background there. So we'll bring this down and just put in your little jagged edges for your rock shape. Now at the bottom of this one, we're going to do something slightly different. I'm going to come up and make a loop. And I'll make a smaller loop next to that. And a smaller one next to that. Maybe one more. You can go ahead and texture these just by roughing the edges up a little bit so they're not all so perfect looking. And then just above these, you're going to do a line that traces the outside shape of your little loops there, like that. And then of course you can go ahead and texture the other parts of your rock as normal. So this little area that we just drew is kind of like the edge of the rock. So if you have like a ledge like this, that's the top, right? This is the edge, and it sort of cuts back like this. You're seeing a front view of this, so this is the view that you're seeing. So we have these like sort of jagged, broken off bits of rock that create that drop. Although because it's sort of this traditional style, then we modify it a little bit, simplify it a little bit, and it looks a bit more stylized. Okay, last things last for this one, we're going to go and drop in that little waterfall area. So just dropping in some curved lines behind our rocks here. Like that. And to finish us off, we can link these up at the back with these little curves. And then to finish our little design off, we're going to just add in some, what looks like clouds. And it could certainly be clouds, but I like to put some clouds sort of in the background of my waves and stuff like that. And it could either look like clouds, could represent a little bit of mist on top of the water, or it could also represent when the water sort of hits the rocks and it foams up and creates those bubbles. It can sort of look like that depending on where you put them. But it's okay to sort of mix these elements, and you know, that's art's about being creative. Study a lot of traditional Japanese tattoo art and background work, scenery, things like that, and you'll get a good idea for how you want this to look in your artwork. And that right there is how we draw some Japanese waves and rocks. Alright, so now we've got our two sketches. It's pretty rare that I run you guys through my entire lining process. I like to just get the line work out of the way and go straight into blending and shading. And the reason for that is because everyone lines their work differently. You know, depending on how you want it to look, you'll boost up different parts. And I want to sort of give you guys the foundations and building blocks of these designs, but I want you to be able to create your own artwork with it. But in this video, I'm going to make an exception, and we're going to go ahead and do the line work in this video as well, because I think it's pretty line work specific. So I'm going to give you a sort of quick run through on how to do the line work. So I've got my light pad ready. I've also got a piece of A4 watercolor paper, and I'm going to go ahead and tape my designs to the back of this. Okay, I've taped the designs to the back of my watercolor sheet. I just want to mention quickly, I'm using Fabriano cold press watercolor paper. It's 300 GSM, and it's like a medium tooth sort of paper. I've had a few messages about this. If you're having trouble getting really nice smooth blends on your watercolor paper, maybe try switching over to hot press watercolor paper. It's got a much smoother finish. For today's illustrations, we're going to be using a Drawing System 0.5 and a Drawing System 0.8 from Artline. They're both fairly fine nibs. Because we're just doing background work, I don't want anything too big. And I'm also going to be using a black Sharpie, regular fine point Sharpie. So I'm going to go ahead and switch my light pad on so that you can see the designs, and we'll get into lining these. So we're going to start with our cloud design here, and we're going to start with our 0.8. We're going to do our first layer of clouds using the 0.8. Just tracing the lines that you drew in pencil using the 0.8 for the clouds. Now, I have mentioned this in previous videos, but if you don't have a light pad, you should get one. They are relatively inexpensive nowadays, and they are absolutely phenomenal for any sort of art, but very specifically for tracing tattoo flash on a watercolor paper and, you know, getting it ready to paint. I find this to be an absolute treat. If you can't afford one or you don't want to get one, you can go ahead and stick your iPhone torch underneath a glass table and trace through that. Or the other thing you can do is tape your design up to a glass window with some natural sunlight coming through it, and you can go ahead and trace through that also. So I'm just lining these clouds, and I'm going to stop when we hit that first wind bar there. And what we're going to do from here is just take our 0.5 size pen, so a finer line, and trace the top line of that wind bar all the way up. And we're going to use that 0.5 to trace the two lines below that also. Now, one thing that I find that helps to get these real steady lines is don't move your wrist too much. Keep your wrist relatively still and move from like the elbow, okay? And this means that your line doesn't get too much shake to it, and you can get these nice, smooth, consistent lines. I'm just joining that up at the top and at the bottom. So for the clouds that are behind our wind bars, you can either do them in a light gray pen. In this case, I want to line them in black. I'm going to use my 0.5 because it's a slightly thinner line than our 0.8. So because it's behind something, we use a thinner or a lighter line, and we shade it less harshly or less intensely. And I find that that looks best for me. So I'm leaving a little gap, and I'm just tracing around these the same way that I would normally, but leaving the little gap on either side. Okay, we're going to draw these wind bars above it as well. they're going to get cut off by this first win bar that comes across the page, so you don't need to worry about getting that perfect loop in every time. You just bring it around till it touches this win bar and join up the back of it also. And then I'll turn my page to make things a little bit easier, and we'll bring a line around. Like this, and do the line above it as well. This is with the 0.5. Now to do the little cloud shapes that come across the top of your win bars here, we'll use the 0.8. Again, a slightly thicker line to outline these clouds. We use our 0.8 again for these clouds behind that. And you can sort of see how we layer the background, so things sit in front and behind of other things, other elements of the design. And this way you can get these cool sort of transparent area effects, and it really sort of makes it come together. I'm going to turn the page a little bit so it's easier angle to work from. We'll take our 0.5 again, and we'll go ahead and line these win bars. You'll notice my line work with the 0.5s is a little bit gappy. It doesn't necessarily have a real solid line to it. I've done that on purpose. So sometimes what you'll do when you do these backgrounds is do like lines that have skips in them or little gaps in them. And that's because you're going to bring the shading right to that line anyways, and it'll sort of mask that. But you also don't want those lines to be super solid and bold, because they're supposed to be the softer areas of the design that sort of blend in and have that flowy sort of soft look to them, especially with wind bars and like waves. Okay, for these rows of clouds, again, 0.8 coming in doing the clouds. And using the 0.8 to cap off the top of this design as well. All right, fantastic. As you can see, we've got our clouds here. We're going to go ahead and outline our waves now, and then we'll start shading and tricking these out, because at the moment they look very light and they don't have any depth to them. But as soon as you start adding your black shading, bam, they're going to have a lot of depth and detail to them. So let's go ahead and outline our waves. All right, so outlining this one is quite similar. To do our rocks, however, we're going to be using a Sharpie. So this is just a regular fine point Sharpie, and we use those, or I use those to do the rocks. And I basically vary the pressure that I put on the nib to give me different areas of texture. So coming up to the peaks, I press a little bit harder to get a slightly fatter line. And then when I do these little curve parts in between, I hold back a little bit so that the line skips a little bit and it's not as consistent. And that gives you varied line width and some variance there. So we're going to go ahead and outline those rocks using that technique. So I'll come in a little bit thin, and I'll press a little bit harder at the peaks. And then I'll drop down a little bit and press a little bit harder again at the peaks. And you can even sculpt some of these lines to be thicker just by adding a little bit to them. The rocks are supposed to be nice and bold, so don't be afraid to make these nice and bold. To do the little textures and details on the rocks, I usually just take any fine liner that I've got and sort of block those in. They don't have to be perfect, because we'll come in and paint those later on when we do our black shading. Now, to do the rocks that are sitting behind the waves here, we're going to start by coming in with our Sharpie and drawing in the first part of the rock that's unobscured. Okay. And then as we go behind the waves, we're going to drop back to a 0.8. We're going to come in and do the basic structure of our rock. And then we can boost that line up in a few places just to give it a little bit more shape. But you want it to be probably half the thickness of your Sharpie lines. Okay, for our waves that come across our rocks here, we do the same thing we did with the wind bars, and we use a 0.5. In my opinion, there's not a really big difference between doing wind bars and these water bars. They're basically the exact same thing. The only major difference is the elements that you put around them that make them sort of look like what they are. So of course, if they've got clouds all around them, it's probably not water. It's probably wind, right? And if you're putting crashing waves and rocks and stuff all around them, then it's most likely water. So yeah, there's sort of no big difference between doing the wind bars and the wave bars, except for what you put around them, and maybe, you know, a little bit how you blend them and shade them and things like that. Okay, once you've put in those wave bars there, you take your 0.8 again, and you can go in and start doing your finger waves. From here, you're going to bust your Sharpie out again, and we're going to do this little rock structure behind our waves. Again, just sculpting out those lines to get a bit of variation on them, thickening up certain parts of it. And that one drops down behind the water as well, so we can go back to our 0.8, leave a little gap, draw in your basic structure, and then just worked on sculpting those lines out a little bit. For the waves that sit behind this, I'm going to go ahead and take my 0.5 again and just drop those lines in. Once you get to this bottom section, you'll take your 0.8 and mark out those little loops that we drew, making sure to give the edges of them a little bit of texture. And then link the back up using curved lines. And last but not least, we're going to go ahead and draw in the little clouds or the foamy water at the top, depending on what you want it to be, whether it's mist or clouds or foamy white water. And I'm actually just going to bring and extend my clouds down this way to encompass the design a little bit better. Just like that. So as you can see, I've got my two designs here. We've got our waves and rocks, and we've got our clouds, and they look really nice, but they don't have any depth. So we're going to go ahead and start shading these ones, and I'm going to run you through that process now. Okay, so to start this off, I have a glass of water. This is for washing out the brushes, and in case you need additional water for blending. I've also got two brushes here. Now, as opposed to normal, we don't have an inking brush, or we do, but it's large because we're doing large wash areas with it. So I've got a size 8, and this is a Taklon synthetic watercolor brush, and I've also got a number 6. Okay, I also have Liquitex acrylic ink. This is carbon black, and we're going to start by filling up a few drops in the leftmost well here. We're going to do a single drop in the well to the right, and we'll do a little drop in that well also, because we're going to be making up some grey wash. So we've got solid black. I'm going to add a little bit of water to this one, about that much. That's going to be like a nice medium sort of grey. And for this one here, we will oversaturate it, which will give us a nice light grey. So we're going to start with the clouds. And we're going to start with our light grey wash, which is this one here. We added a lot of water to. That's our lightest grey wash. And we're going to dip our large size brush into that. Saturate it nice and heavily. And we're going to start by painting in the wind bars. So just coming across the wind bars. Get a little bit of water on your brush if you need to bring that grey down. And just painting the entire wind bar in grey. I like to paint a base layer of light grey for all of my backgrounds. I think it's the best way to get nice consistent backgrounds. And you just want to be careful not to overwork the paper too much either. Once again, just using that light grey to paint in the wind bars at the back here. Okay, for our little swirl of wind here, we're going to take light grey again. We're going to come in but leave a little white edge at the top there. Okay, so just coming off that bottom line up and leaving a little white edge at the top, just like that. And then as you follow that around, as you follow that around, this is the line you'll blend off, and you'll leave a white border on the top line there. So just go ahead and take your light gray, leave a little white gap as you come around, and then just blend it down right to the line. For the little loop on the inside, you're going to do the same thing, but you don't have a line to go to, so you're actually just going to bring the blending all the way around using light gray, leaving that little white lip. So leave that little white gap at the top, bring it around and down to the line, and just blend that back behind the clouds here. And then of course you want to leave that white gap all the way around. So coming down the other side, leaving a little white gap until you touch that wind bar there. Okay, doing the first layer or the base layer for your clouds is really simple. You're going to do the exact same thing for all of your clouds. So you're going to go ahead and just take your light gray and paint the inside of the cloud shapes, leaving a nice little white ring around the edge of each cloud, or each section of the cloud, like that. Okay, just using your light gray and working pretty quickly to keep the blends nice and consistent. Just coming around and blending these little circles in, making sure to leave that little white gap. Alright, as you can see, we've got our design here and it's all grey now. So now it's all one tone of grey, and again, there's not really any depth, but the foundation layer of grey is important, I think, and it gives it the sort of foundation work to adding in the black shading and the darker areas of grey that we're going to go ahead and do now. Alright, so I'm going to start with this little area up here. I'm going to go ahead and take some straight black. So this hasn't been watered down at all, this is just our straight black. And just coloring in between your clouds, like this. And then bring a line straight across of black. Take your other brush and just blend that out. And you basically repeat that process. So you take your solid black, paint in between your clouds, then take your blending brush, feather out that entire edge, and then just smoothly blending that down towards our line. And now from here you can start to see some of that depth coming together, and it starts to look really nice. We're going to go ahead and do our little swirl now. So again, coming in with your solid black off this bottom line. And you want to be careful here not to go over your line. Take your blending brush, add some water to it, and feather out that edge. And then gently blending that out. From here, I'll turn my page around because we're going to do this little loop on the inside. Just taking a solid black again and coming in from the bottom, that line. Again, just taking the water, feathering that edge out, and then blending it out. Get a little bit of your darker grey wash, your mid sort of grey wash, and go over the top of your black area. Just bringing that out, forward, and down into that loop area. And then you can just soften out some of those edges using a bit of water. From here, the only thing you're going to do with your wind bars is go back into your lightest grey. Bring a line of that straight over the top of that wind bar. Get a bit of water on there and just blend that in. It should blend really easily and really smoothly because you're just doing another layer of light gray on top of your light gray. And you'll do that just below it as well here. Now to do each section of cloud, you're going to go into your mid gray that you made. And you're going to blend in these sections of cloud just underneath your light gray that you did. Once you've done a section like that, just a little bit of water and gently smooth those edges out a little bit into your light gray. Going back into our mid gray, doing some more of these cloud areas. Like this, blending it through. A little bit of water just to smooth things off a little bit. Okay, last couple of little areas we're going to do on this. I'm going to take a little bit of our solid black and come up from the base of these clouds here. Like this. And then with your blending brush, feather that out and just gently blend that up a little bit into your clouds. Come around to this base. Again, take your black. Come across the bottom here a little bit with your black, feather that out and blend out. Okay, very last thing we're going to do on this one is the clouds, the background clouds down here. To add a little bit of depth to them, we're going to take our medium grey wash. We'll come in from the bottom with our medium grey wash, just coming up. Washing the brush and just blending out that medium gray until it blends in with our light gray. And doing that on the area next to it as well. Medium gray. Coming in at the bottom here. And then blending that up with water to a light gray. Alright, as you can see, we've got our cloud background, our cloud and wind-based background shaded. And that's it for backgrounds with Japanese stuff. It's generally just black shaded. There's not color unless you're going to add some flowers or leaves flying around through the wind, which is a recommendation. I certainly give that a thumbs up. But in this case, we just want to keep it simple and easy to follow. So that's that one shaded, and we're going to jump into doing our waves. Alright, now to do our waves, we're using the same grey washes that we did for our clouds. And we're going to start the same way by doing the water bars using our lightest grey. So we're going to go ahead and paint those water bars in, just using the lightest grey that we've got there. Alright, once you've done those two wave bars, I'm going to go ahead and do the clouds and the waves in the background here. I'm just going to flip my page around to make things easier. We'll take our light grey and we'll start painting in these waves just by leaving a white edge along here on every single wave that we do, and just painting the rest of the shape in using the light grey there. Leaving that white edge, bringing it back to the line and blending it down. Now to do our clouds, we're going to do something a little different than what we did with the wind bars and clouds. We're just going to do a nice simplified thing, coming in from the bottom using a bit of light grey. Rinse the brush out a little bit and just blend that out into the tops of our cloud shapes. I'm just going to do that with like a little grey, light grey wash up into those cloud areas. To do our finger waves, again coming in with your light grey from the base area of your waves, and then washing your brush and blending that forward behind some of the fingers there. And I actually don't really have a specific way of shading waves. I will generally just do a base of grey at the bottom and gently blend that out. And I'll add in some little whips of grey behind some of the fingers. And then I'll go through and darken up some of the areas. I don't have a super specific way of doing my waves. I like to keep it pretty loose and flowing. Alright, once you've done all of those light grey areas, we can jump into our darker or medium grey wash. You're going to start by doing these little loops in the medium grey. You can do these in black, solid black, medium grey. Depending on how you want them to look, you can do a little bit of blending in there as well. For now, I'm going to do a mid grey and we'll see how it looks. You're also going to want to go ahead and take your mid grey and do the rocks. The way you're going to do them is by leaving a really big white edge on them, like that, and then blending the mid grey through the center. Now we'll be going over the top of the rocks with a dark black, like a solid black. So for the parts that are behind the waves, you can also just take your mid grey and bring that down. I'll leave a little gap at the top and then just blend that mid grey down. We're also going to take our mid grey that we made up and do some parts of the wave. So basically anytime there's a line running through the wave, I like to add a little bit of mid grey like this. Rinse my brush out a bit or use a blending brush and blend that out into the light grey. And this will give your waves a little bit of depth and dimension, as well as help parts of the wave stand out a little more than others, depending on what's in front of what in terms of how you want to layer things. Once you've got your waves looking the way that you want them to, you can go ahead and shade these bars in the background there. We're going to use some solid black for those, same way we did our wind bars in the previous one. So you can go ahead and I'll start here with my solid black just behind our waves, drawing our solid black in like that. Take your blending brush, feather that edge out and just blend it forward gently, and then come in just below your waves to do the next little section. And now what you want to do is repeat this process of adding black and blending out along all of your little wave bars at the back here. Once you've done that, you're going to want to go ahead and start painting your rocks. We're going to use solid black for those as well. And we're going to do a little bit of solid black coming up off this edge, like that. Just following our line around with our solid black. When we get to about halfway, 3/4 mark, just shape off that edge using the same angles from the shape of our rock. And then take your blending brush and just gently feather out those edges into your medium grey. For the rocks that go behind the water, you're still going to do a little bit of black, but you're just going to do it much lower. And there's no shape at the top, it's just blended smoothly from the bottom up into your grey. And this will just give the rocks that are underneath the water that little bit more depth that they need. Alright, once you've blended in your rocks and you've done all of your black, there's just two more things to do. We're going to turn the page so that we get this angle here. We're going to come in with our light and medium greys, coming in from the base, not quite touching the rocks, just avoiding them with a bit of a gap. It's just a rough gap, nothing too crazy. Coming up, washing the brush just to blend that grey out until it's in our white or light grey. Just coming around here as well and washing that out. Alright, and very last thing you want to do, and you can do this with the paintbrush, but just for speed's sake, I'll take a fine liner and just do all those little textures that we did on our rocks in a solid black for those textures. leave the ones that are underneath the water for now. And for the ones that are underneath the water, take your medium gray and just go over the top of those and saturate them heavily. So they're not going to be super dark, you know, solid black, but they'll be a nice dark sort of gray color for those textured areas of the rocks. And that's how we do the crashing waves and rocks Japanese style background. That is it, guys, for today's video. I really hope you enjoyed this one, and I hope you give it a go. Our backgrounds both came out really nice. I much prefer this one, but that's because I like the big rock structures, so I tend to prefer Japanese waves crashing over rocks sort of backgrounds. But either way, they both look nice, and if you were to put some other elements in there, of course, a main subject matter, or maybe some Japanese flowers with a nice vibrant colors, it really helps these backgrounds work and stand out so that they look great. I just want to say a big thank you because my channel recently hit 5,000 subscribers. You guys have been so fantastic in supporting me, and I just wanted to say a big thank you for that. I really do appreciate it. Head over to Daggett Designs on Facebook if you'd like to see my online portfolio, or if you want to send me a message, whether you want feedback on your art or if you just want to have a chat about art in general. I also have Instagram now, so head over to Instagram at Daggett Designs. There'll be a link down in the description, and there you can also see my online portfolio and work in progress sort of pictures and some behind the scenes stuff. Please leave a comment in the comment section down below letting me know what you'd like to see in future videos. If you want to see more tutorials or if you want to see art challenges, something different, just let me know down below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up as well while you're at it. If you're new to my channel, make sure you hit the subscribe button down there. Make sure to hit that notification bell so that you never miss a video when they come out. And that having been said, I will see you guys in the next video. Keep drawing. Bye.